She thought spraying my service dog would silence me until the cops arrived and told her it was a federal crime. The day started out ordinary, with a simple walk through the apartment complex. The kind of walk that feels routine, almost calming, because my service dog is right there beside me. She isn't just a pet, she's trained to help me when my body or mind falters, a constant companion who makes daily life manageable. Her presence is my sense of balance, my reassurance that no matter how unpredictable things get, I'm not alone. As we moved quietly down the path, her ears perked and her steady stride matched mine. I had no idea trouble was brewing just ahead. Suddenly, the silence shattered with sharp footsteps and a voice dripping with hostility. A woman I recognized only by reputation, everyone casually called her Karen, stormed into view. She wasn't just walking, she was charging toward us like she owned the place. Her face was red, her eyes narrowed, and before I could even greet her, she pointed at my dog as though she'd spotted some sort of threat. "What is this dog doing here?" she barked. "Dogs aren't allowed in this community. It's against the HOA rules." Her tone was so aggressive it startled me for a moment. My service dog paused at my side, tilting her head, trained to read my body language, sensing the sudden spike of tension. I tried to stay calm. I had faced uncomfortable comments before, questions, stares, even judgment, but this was different. There was no curiosity in her voice, only hostility, as though she was ready to fight me for simply existing with my dog. I took a slow breath and explained, as clearly as I could, she's a service dog. She's not a pet. I need her, and by law, she has every right to be here. But my words didn't soften her anger. If anything, she seemed to grow more enraged. Her hands went to her hips, her jaw tightened, and she stepped closer, crowding the space between us. "I don't care what you call it," she snapped. "Rules are rules. No dogs allowed." At that moment, I realized this wasn't about rules at all. It was about control, about her belief that she could dictate who belonged and who didn't. The irony was heavy. Here I was, relying on a trained animal who gave me freedom and independence, and here she was, determined to strip that from me with nothing more than spite. My dog stayed rooted to the ground, steady but alert, her tail low, eyes fixed on me as though waiting for my cue. She was doing exactly what she was trained to do: stand by, protect my space, and stay calm under pressure. Her silent loyalty only made the woman's outburst seem more ridiculous. I could feel the weight of neighbors' eyes on us from a distance. Curtains shifted, doors creaked open slightly. It wasn't just me and Karen anymore. It was me, my service dog, and an audience witnessing a clash between ignorance and dignity. The tension in the air was thick, and though I tried to resolve things with patience, deep down, the argument had already left me rattled. But what happened next crossed a line I never imagined anyone would dare. Karen's face twisted with irritation as if my calm explanations only fueled her fury. She wasn't hearing me, she wasn't even trying. Her eyes darted to my service dog, my anchor, my lifeline, and in that instant, I sensed she was about to do something reckless. My dog, ever patient, stood completely still, her chest rising and falling steadily, waiting for me to move. But I didn't get the chance. Without warning, Karen reached into her bag and pulled out a small spray bottle. The glint of it in her hand caught my eye and sent a rush of panic through me. I barely had time to react before she pressed the nozzle and sprayed directly into my dog's face. A sharp mist filled the air, sharp enough that I caught a whiff myself, stinging my nose and throat. My heart lurched. My service dog froze, her eyes blinking rapidly, body shivering from the sudden shock. She stumbled slightly, pawing at her muzzle, confused by the unexpected assault. This wasn't a playful splash of water, it was deliberate. The trust and innocence in her gaze cut right through me, and anger and fear surged inside my chest. For me, this wasn't just about someone being rude. This was a direct attack on the very being who gives me safety and independence every single day. I stepped in quickly, kneeling beside her, wiping at her fur, murmuring softly to reassure her even as my own pulse thundered in my ears. The world around me blurred for a moment, narrowed down to the image of my loyal companion trembling at my side. She didn't whine, she didn't lash out, her training held, but her confusion was written all over her body. When I looked up, Karen was smirking. "See? Problem solved," she sneered, as though she'd just rid the world of an inconvenience instead of traumatizing a service animal. That smug look only twisted the knife deeper. She didn't see my dog as essential to my health, my stability, my survival. She saw her as just another rule to break, just another nuisance to erase. I could feel neighbors shifting behind windows, their silent gasps cutting through the heavy quiet. Someone muttered under their breath. The line between being a nosy onlooker and a horrified witness had been crossed. The air carried the weight of what she had just done. This wasn't a petty dispute anymore. It was cruelty, plain and simple. I gripped my phone with trembling hands and dialed the police. My voice shook as I reported the incident, trying to stay composed while my service dog leaned into me for comfort. Each second felt endless, every breath heavy, as if the world itself was holding back its judgment until the authorities arrived. Karen stood there, arms folded, completely unfazed, as if she'd done something heroic instead of something heartless. She had no idea the gravity of what she had just unleashed. As my service dog trembled beside me and I struggled to steady my own breathing, Karen's reaction wasn't one of regret or even concern, it was amusement. She stood there with her arms crossed, watching me comfort my dog as though the entire situation were some kind of spectacle put on for her entertainment. Her lips curled into a mocking smile, and with a laugh that cut like glass, she said the words that still sting when I think about them, "It's just a dog. I didn't do anything wrong." That dismissiveness hit harder than the spray itself. My dog wasn't just a dog. She was my protector, my helper, my bridge to independence in a world that doesn't always make room for people like me. To trivialize her role was to trivialize my needs, my struggles, and my rights. Karen didn't see the tears welling in my eyes or the way my hands shook as I held my companion close. Or maybe she did, and she simply didn't care. That cold indifference was more chilling than any angry outburst could have been. Her tone was smug, as though she had caught me breaking some petty neighborhood rule and put me back in my place. She leaned on the HOA no pets line like it was her badge of honor, never once acknowledging that federal law stood far above any community guideline. She wasn't fighting for fairness, she was fighting for control. And in her mind, cruelty toward my service dog was justified if it meant proving a point. Neighbors had begun to gather now, some peeking from behind their doors, others stepping out quietly onto the sidewalk. I could hear the low murmur of whispers. Did she really spray the dog? Is she serious right now? The quiet judgment of the crowd hung in the air, but Karen seemed immune to it, still brushing off her actions like she had swatted a fly. I tried to hold my ground, my voice shaking but firm. This isn't just a dog. She's a service animal. What you did is serious. You could have hurt her. Karen rolled her eyes and laughed again, a harsh sound that only fueled my frustration. "Oh, please," she said. "You're overreacting. If you can't handle the rules, maybe you shouldn't be living here." It was clear she believed she had the upper hand, that her cruelty could be disguised as enforcement of the rules. But in her arrogance, she had overlooked the truth: service animals aren't optional, and harming one isn't a petty violation, it's a crime. Watching her dismiss it so casually, standing tall in her false sense of victory, I felt a fire building inside me. She didn't know it yet, but her words and actions were about to unravel completely once the police arrived. The sound of sirens in the distance sent a ripple through the gathering crowd. For me, it was a lifeline. For Karen, it was nothing more than background noise, or so she thought. My service dog leaned against my leg, still shaky but steadying herself, her trust in me unwavering. I kept one hand on her back, grounding both of us as the police car pulled up to the curb. 2 officers stepped out, their presence immediately changing the energy in the air. Conversations hushed, neighbors pulled closer, and suddenly all eyes were on the confrontation. I explained everything as best I could, my voice still trembling from shock. I described how Karen had approached me, how she'd argued about HOA rules, and finally how she had pulled out the spray and deliberately attacked my service dog. I gestured toward my companion, whose eyes still watered faintly, though she stood composed as if trying to be strong for me. My words poured out, the weight of the incident pressing on my chest. One officer knelt to check on my dog, noting her posture and the way she blinked against irritation. His tone softened when he looked up at me, and I could see in his eyes that he understood this wasn't just an overblown neighbor dispute, it was something much more serious. Meanwhile, Karen stood several feet away with her arms crossed, smirking like she was untouchable. "She's exaggerating," Karen interrupted loudly. "It's just a dog. I didn't harm anything. This whole thing is ridiculous." Her voice carried a false confidence, but the officers weren't swayed. One of them turned back to me, patiently clarifying details, writing notes, asking questions. Every time I answered, Karen tried to interject, growing more desperate to frame herself as the victim of some imagined misunderstanding. But the more she spoke, the clearer it became to everyone watching that she had no defense, just arrogance. The second officer finally turned to her, his expression calm but stern. "Ma'am, we're hearing very consistent statements from multiple witnesses here." Neighbors nodded in agreement, some even stepping forward to back up my story. Karen's smirk faltered for just a moment, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. My heart pounded as I stood beside my dog, her fur warm against my hand, waiting for the officers to say what needed to be said. The weight of every second stretched out, the neighborhood holding its breath. Karen shifted from one foot to the other, still trying to look unfazed, but her composure was beginning to crack under the steady gaze of the law. This was no longer just my word against hers. The police had taken the scene into their hands, and the balance of power that Karen thought she held was slowly but surely slipping away. The tension reached its breaking point as everyone stood waiting for the officer's final word. My heart raced, my hand still resting on my service dog's back, feeling the rise and fall of her steady breathing. She was calmer now, but the sting of what had been done lingered in her eyes, and that alone kept my own anger alive. Karen shifted impatiently, tapping her foot, her arms folded tightly as though the act of looking defiant could somehow erase the truth. Then one of the officers straightened his posture, his notebook closing with a deliberate snap. He turned to Karen, his voice even but commanding, the kind of tone that slices through excuses and leaves no room for argument. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "interfering with or harming a service animal is not just against the rules. It is a federal crime." The words hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. The crowd of neighbors collectively gasped, a wave of murmurs spreading instantly. Some people looked at each other wide-eyed, others shook their heads in disbelief. My pulse slowed just slightly, as though those words had given me permission to finally exhale. Karen, on the other hand, froze. Her smirk vanished. Her jaw slackened as if she hadn't fully processed what had just been said. The officer's words seemed to pierce right through her shield of arrogance, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. For the first time since she stormed toward me, she was silent. No eye-rolling, no mocking laugh, just silence. Her face turned pale, her hands fidgeted, and she looked around as though hoping anyone might come to her defense. No one did. The officer didn't stop there. He continued, his voice steady but unyielding. "People depend on these animals for survival. What you did is serious. If we move forward with charges, you could be facing fines, even jail time." Karen swallowed hard, her earlier bravado completely gone. The weight of the situation finally seemed to land on her shoulders, crushing the false authority she'd been clinging to. Neighbors who had been watching in silence now turned their attention to me, some offering sympathetic nods, others glaring at Karen with open disapproval. I glanced down at my service dog, who leaned into my leg with quiet loyalty. Relief surged through me, not because the ordeal was erased, but because someone had finally named it for what it was. It wasn't a petty dispute. It wasn't a matter of HOA rules. It was a crime, and the law was on our side. Karen remained motionless, caught in the moment like a statue. The authority she thought she carried had dissolved completely, replaced by the crushing realization that she wasn't above the law after all. And for the first time since it all began, I felt the scales of justice shift in my favor.